Well, hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Current, real talk on real topics. Excited to be here with you. I'm Curtis, joined with Beau here. And we've got a fun episode lined up for you today, at least I think.
Yes, it's a fun one.
The title for today's episode is The Devil Made Me Do It.
Ooh.
What's up with angels and demons? So, a fun kind of different topic. I know, at least for me, growing up in the church, angels, demons didn't get talked about a whole lot. Like, they popped up in Bible stories, but it never was really a focus in church for me.
Same for me. Yep.
Yeah. So I thought it'd be fun to take an episode and kind of dive into this. What should we as Christians make of this whole angel demon stuff that's in the Bible? It's around. So I guess we gotta deal with it somehow.
Sure.
And so I thought it'd be fun to work our way through that. I don't know. I guess let's start with saying where do you kind of sit on the angel demon spectrum? Is this a thing? Are they real?
Yeah. I definitely on the spectrum am that they are real.
Yeah.
And I myself don't have any like crazy experiences with them, but I have obviously talked to others who have. Although I will say when I was a child, I feel like not necessarily, I wouldn't say I was possessed, but I had very vivid dreams that were just awful, and I would say they come from nowhere other than the devil. And so I've been kind of freed from those and not really deal with those anymore. But like, so for me personally, I don't have any like crazy experiences with angels and demons. But I think obviously when I read scripture, we'll talk about this some, but when I read the scriptures, there's ample evidence of Jesus interacting with them, from multiple gospel account writers. It seemed very prevalent in biblical times. I still think it's, prevalent today.
For sure.
I think it's very, very real. So I wouldn't deny it completely. At the same time, there's a healthy balance we'll talk about too.
Yeah.
So what about you?
Definitely. It's been funny that when it comes to this topic, it's kind of been a journey for me throughout my faith. When you first are kind of exposed to Christianity, given to church, it's just kind of a given, an assumption. Yeah, angels, demons, it's in the Bible. It's fine. And then I know for me, as I began to rethink through some of my faith, as I began to be in more academic circles to do those kind of things, sometimes the kind of demons and angels get pushed off to the side, and they can be seen a bit as sort of an embarrassing part of the faith. And I know that was something that I've experienced where, I'm comfortable talking about my faith. I can tell you about Jesus. I can tell you about this God who, was born of a virgin and died and all that. But then once you start saying, well, what do you think about angels and demons? And I'd become kind of embarrassed. I wouldn't want to admit to this. I think it feels sometimes like we're too advanced, we're too intelligent nowadays to believe in such crazy things as angels and demons.
Sure.
But in the last couple of years, I kind of come around and really have been in a place where I think we as Christians should affirm these realities, that angels and demons are a part of the world and something that we should engage with and understand, but without going overboard. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. I guess for me, thinking through some of what drove me back to saying, hey, we should acknowledge the reality of the angelic and the demonic is one, like you said, it's a part of our scriptures, It's all over it. You can't turn through a page of the Gospels almost without running into Jesus encountering something demonic in his ministry or delivering someone, or you can't go a couple pages without an angel showing up to announce the arrival of Jesus. And so it permeates the New Testament. It's not something that's kind of an aside, but something that's central, and to throw away would be thrown away quite a bit, would make it difficult. And the other thing for me was, I talked a bit about that embarrassed feeling of like, oh my gosh, do I really want to say that I believe in demons or angels? But I think a big part for us as Christians is thinking like, how big of a leap is that really? Like, we already say there's a disembodied spirit we call God, and we want to affirm that there are miracles and Jesus walked on water and all of these things. How much further is it for us to go to acknowledge and say, like, no, maybe a part of God's good creation was he created other disembodied agents, spirits that have volition and will, can do good, can do harm, and are just part of the good world that God created. It doesn't seem that much more crazy to me.
Sure. And this may be a kind of a side tangent, but I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, because I kind of know how I feel about, I mean, you talk about just specifically the United States and maybe how prevalent some of those forces are here compared to other parts of the world. I mean, you hear stories all the time about, missionaries encountering this stuff all the time. And so, why don't you hear more about that in the States? And so I've heard, one pastor say that, it's just kind of the climate that is the United States. It's not, we're not really open to the spiritual realm and this, other kind of beings. And so it's just all kind of tampered. It's kind of like we're a desert. You might stumble on an oasis where it's, but like other parts of the world, it seems to be happening all the time. Like, what do you think about that? Like,
I really like that image of like the oasis in the desert, because I do think there are places that are more spiritually ripe and apt to have those kind of things happen, and we in the West, I don't think are as fertile spiritual ground. But I also sometimes wonder, I don't know if you've ever read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis.
I have. Yeah.
Right. So if you're not familiar with this book, really interesting. I encourage you to read it. C.S. Lewis kind of gets in the mind of a demon and writes this fictional writing of this demon in training that's giving letters to his uncle Screwtape about, the demonic world and what they do. But I'm pretty sure in there he talks about this sort of a strategy to say, hey, why would we want to be prevalent? Why would we want to be known and noticed? If we can fly under the radar and we can, go about our business undisturbed, then why not? And I wonder if sometimes, I don't want to get into the mind of a demon, necessarily, but there might be something tactical too to say, yeah, you in the West just live your nice materialistic life and think there's nothing, more than just the matter and atoms going around. There's no spiritual conflict going on. It might be to their benefit. I don't know. That's just thinking.
No, that's a good point. And to kind of get back to where we were heading, I know something I really try to do just when I think about theology or places I land on controversial topics or, stuff that we may not understand as greatly, I tend to look towards or backwards, I guess, through time and through church history. Like maybe the people closest to Jesus, what did they believe? Or, some of the first Christians, what did they believe? Or the church as a whole, what did they believe? And I think you would agree that it's probably pretty standard that they believe in angels and demons. It's not like, and that's why I'm always very weary of like taking a position that's outside of the.
That's such a good point. Yeah. If the church has spoken almost univocally throughout its history on something, we want to be careful before we divert course. We should have some good reasons. And that's not to say, we can't evolve or think differently or theology doesn't move forward in some ways. But if the entire church has said, there's angels, there's demons, we should be careful to, not jump board too quickly.
Sure.
We should have good reason to do so. And I think another thing too is for Jesus, we talked about how demons appear in his ministry a lot, but not only do they kind of make appearances in these stories, but it's central to how Jesus understood his mission as the Messiah coming too. I think of a passage like Hebrews 2:14, where it talks about how Jesus shared in flesh and blood like ours so that he could defeat the devil and destroy him who held us in slavery, the fear of death. It's central to Jesus' mission. He came to undo the works of the devil, to defeat the enemy kingdom. And if for us to say like, I don't know, maybe demons, we're taking not just something that's small, but a huge chunk of how Jesus understood what he was coming to do, what he was trying to accomplish. And so, if we throw out demons there, I think we're throwing out a big part of how Jesus understood his work here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and to think that there's a realm outside of the physical just further emphasizes, again, like you're talking about, what Jesus is all about. It's a supernatural. It goes further than what.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, evidence of the resurrection. And it's just a part of really what Jesus was all about. Is there's a supernatural force. It's almost encouraging that there are things that happen that can't be explained in some way.
Yeah. Well, I even think, I know you've brought this up before, thinking about Paul in Ephesians talking about how our battle's not with flesh and blood, talking about how it's against, principalities and powers in this present darkness. Paul envisions, very spiritual battle that's taking place around us. And so to limit it, just to physical workings, I think misses out on so much of what's happening in the Christian life.
For sure. And I know like there might be people listening that you might be kind of scared of this idea, or maybe, some people listening too that like your kids have asked questions, or you're wrestling with it yourself. You're not sure where you land. And I know a big part of just my heart and kind of what I am all about in ministry is I tend to lead more from my heart. And so my heart goes out to you, some of you that are wrestling with those questions and like things like this, or maybe you've experienced something you might consider demonic, or maybe you've, felt an angelic presence, even maybe on the good side of things. I think one of my hearts, what I want to communicate today is maybe just some practical helps or steps, maybe just even my ministry experience about how you can maybe guard or protect yourself. And I would say too, like, again, like going back to your kids, if you're having questions or your kids are having questions about this, or you, as a family, want to have these discussions, I think you should, because again, like I think we both agree that it's very real and it's a presence, and you should be honest about those things, because the more you know, this is true of every area of life, the more you know, just the more comfortable you are. Okay. And the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you are. I think when we as Christians kind of shove it down and don't talk about things like this, even in the midst of our families, I think kids can become scared. If they are experiencing something, or you too can continue to be scared if you're not, researching or listening, or like at least like being open to understanding it more. I think it drives out that fear. Because ultimately our God, we know that God is victorious, and these powers that, might be against God, we know the final say. We know God has power over, and it's evidence in the New Testament, it's evidence in the resurrection.
Absolutely.
Obviously we know the final story, but it doesn't make it easier to comprehend. But I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that. It's just,
I think that's super important to think through, and I'm glad you brought up like kids. I know we've had even parents that have come forward and said, hey, my kids are asking questions about this. They see Bible stories and, they're curious. They want to know. And I think it is important to address those, to have those kind of conversations. But like you said, to hopefully do it in such a way that's encouraging, to remind and say, hey, even though this is what's going on, like we have a God that's good, that is victorious, that will, I don't, did you ever watch VeggieTales growing up?
Oh yeah.
Was that a thing for you?
Yeah.
Okay. I always think there was that, the episode where, Junior Asparagus or whatever, he's all worried and there's a big monsters and stuff, and they sing that song, God is bigger than the boogeyman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so
God is bigger than the
exactly.
bigger than yeah.
Well, yeah,
it's bigger than Godzilla and the monsters on TV, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. God's bigger than the boogeyman. He's watching out for you and me.
Yeah.
And that's good to know that while sure there is evil, there is, maybe the demonic that's at work, that we have a God who cares about us, has the hairs on our head number, wants to, watch after us. And so I would want to lean on that side. Jesus is the light that turns on and expels the darkness. And so it's not something that we need to fear or cower, but it is something we should, I guess maybe I'd say, respect.
Yeah,
it's
for sure. And I'm glad you said that, because this is where I was wanting to go next.
Yeah.
Like, people ask me all the time about things like this, and I always err on just the side of caution. Mm-hmm. So like, for me in my own life, a boundary that I've set, because again, I've had dreams in the past that are just, I would say, very demonic. Sure. And just like, I'm talking things you could never imagine. Even as a child, I was seeing in my brain, and like just stuff I literally can't describe it other than demonic. And so, from a very young age, I've just been terrified of like scary movies, even because I feel like, you can say all you want, like you might enjoy them, but I feel like they are demonic. Some of the things that happen in them are just like sickening, like, and it's just like extremely frightful and like not like. So for me, a healthy boundary for me is I just choose not to watch those movies, because mainly I don't want to open my mind up to, again, maybe some of those thoughts reoccurring, or some of those dreams to come back, or like, I just am very cautious with that, just for my own personal health,
which I think is good. We don't want to play with fire. Like we should understand it. We should know it's there.
Yeah, like and when I was doing youth ministry, kids would come up to me fascinated with like Ouija boards.
Oh yeah,
and I would just be like, don't mess with it. Like it's not worth it.
Exactly.
And I heard stories about crazy stuff happening after like the Ouija thing going on, and like I'm just like,
you never know. And that's what's tough too. Is I think of Peter. The devil is prowling around like a lion. Like, we should be on guard. We don't need to be fearful. But yeah, we don't want to be needlessly putting ourselves in potentially, harm's way.
Sure.
The Bible speaks to and talks about, pushing against kind of like divination and dealing with kind of those spiritual, occultish kind of things. Like when you pick up the line, you don't know who's on the other end, I guess, And so it's something that we want to be careful of. We want to
Sure. Like, while we have confidence that Jesus is victorious, we shouldn't still just be careless with our minds.
Exactly.
Or careless with our spiritual, environment and health.
Yeah.
Like, just because I know, like, I'm going to be with Jesus when I die doesn't mean I'm not going to wear my seatbelt, or, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's
Exactly.
just like, it's just that mentality of being careful and not exposing yourself to potential danger in the spiritual realm, so.
Well, now that we kind of open it up to like the occult and the Ouija boards, it makes me wonder about this then. Like, what are maybe some of your thoughts on like mediums, psychics, that kind of stuff, and how it relates to us as Christians? You have any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah. So, I've been asked this before. I'm not 100% sure where I land. Sure. I think some of them. Okay, I'll just put it this way. Just as like I would say, like I would say the majority of them are probably not accurate or true. I think they're maybe trying to tap into some things that maybe it's not the Holy Spirit or not the spiritual realm, that, a lot of it may be a way to make money. There might be some underlining like motives there. That tends to be where I land. Like, this is just a hoax. This is like, they're going to tell you some things that they probably tell the person that was in there before you, and like it's just kind of general broad things. Yeah. But I think there's sometimes, there might be, again, I'm not ruling it out completely. There might be someone out there that has a spiritual gift of discernment or visions or prophecy that they are using in a God-honoring way.
Sure.
Now, again, I would be very careful. I would be very skeptical. I think where I would pursue some of maybe that stuff out would be the church, would be community, maybe seek out people with those spiritual gifts specifically, not somebody that wants you to pay. We don't know if they have a relationship with Jesus, or if they're even, in tune with the Holy Spirit, or, what, right. But there, I do believe in those gifts, and I believe that those can be exercised and used well. Like, and I think there might be things where, times in which it's okay, but for the most part, I'm kind of like, it all depends on like motivation, or like, why are they really doing it?
Yeah. But, and that's so tough. I don't know. My thoughts on medium psychics, it tends to be like, this is fake it at, best and harmful at worst. It's kind of in there. I think there's a lot of, just like I think there's people who go into the guise of Christianity and say they have all these things that are doing it for, gain or have impure motives. I think that happens in the psychic medium community too.
Yeah.
That being said, could there be an instance in which there's something real and very spiritual happening? Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out, but I would be cautious as to what's the source of this information, how is it, what is it, and I just I want to, there's some clear warnings against kind of divination and working down that road. I like you saying, hey, let's see in the life and the function of the church, there are some giftings that we can speak about. We can, there's room for God to move and speak and do those kind of things and meet us in those ways, and I think we should do them in ways that are prescribed to us,
Sure.
Do it as the church, not going outside.
And I've seen that obviously abused in the church as well, like prayer cloths, like send me your money and you'll get this prayer cloth, and so I'm not saying like the church is perfect in doing that stuff either, but I would at least start with like a pastor, somebody somebody you trust, or a good friend to maybe start speaking some things into your life, somebody that you've seen exercise this gift before of prophecy, or really a heavy discernment to the Spirit. Speaking of that, I had a really good friend for a long time, and we kind of fell out of touch, but his name was Tim, and probably one of the most spiritually in tune people I've ever met. Like, we would go places and we'd be sitting down and somebody would walk by and he would just like get the chills, because he'd be like, oh, that person's like, whoa, like,
really,
or he would like call me out of the blue and pinpoint sin in my life that I was struggling with, specific sin, not just like broad generic, like, hey, like you need to stop this, like very in tune with the Spirit. And it was a giant blessing for me, but it's also, to him sometimes a curse, just because like he, just had to deal with a lot of just kind of oppression and what came along with that as well. And so I've been around those people. I know those people exist. I know there's people with giftings in that. They're just much more in tune with the Spirit. So. Yeah,
I think this would be interesting. You talk about like, being in tune with the Spirit and seeing it, and that comes up a lot. I know for some people then you can almost swing to an extreme, talking about this, the title's called The Devil Made Me Do It, people can, I think, hear these things and say, okay, the demonic's real, and they can almost go to one extreme where it's a demon under every rock, and yep, the devil made me do it, and everything's a form of spiritual oppression, and we can swing to that extreme. Like, what are your thoughts along that lines? What to you seems like a healthy balance?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have these conversations a lot. Obviously, we're dealing with people, mainly people I deal with are in the midst of relational conflict, like whether it's a marriage or it's, somebody's mad at me or I did something to upset somebody, or like, a lot of times that's what I deal with is just kind of relationship issues. And so I do encourage them to not just say, hey, this is just a battle, because like scripture says, it's not just a battle of flesh and blood. There is a spiritual component to this, and you need to address that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like like you were saying, if you're just being a jerk, like sometimes you're just being a jerk. Like, it's not, you can't just blame it on Satan. Now, there are some times I've witnessed this in kind of marriages that have crumbled, is there's a hardened heart. Like, I'm talking a very hardened heart that Satan has just kind of taken a foothold and a grip on somebody's life. And then that is just like prayer and prayer and prayer and God, miracle. Because like there are instances in that case too, where like, this isn't just him being a jerk anymore or her being a jerk anymore. This is something deeper here. Like this is a spiritual issue that you've got to work through. And so kind of like most things in life, I feel like Rhythm Church, like we meet somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And so it's not all spiritual. I think there's a spiritual component really behind everything, but I would say there's also just some human responsibility.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, there's not a demon under every rock. It's like, there's a healthy balance there. So,
I think that's an important thing to strike. I know I've had some conversations with people who have even brought up and said, I think maybe something demonic's going on. And I guess my approach to this is generally to shoot a little bit in both directions. I think, this would just be me guessing, 9 times out of 10, there's nothing demonic going on. I think generally, we don't see those kind of demonic things happening very often, but I think it can occasionally. And so, we don't want to be on the side of never totally rule it out. It's out of the possibility. And so I like to shoot both ways. Yeah. Hey, if you're experiencing, whatever these symptoms are, go see a medical professional, make sure physiologically everything's good. That can be too. And then, but also, spend some time praying, spend some time doing those, kind of shoot in both directions. We don't want to say it's always, and we don't want to say it's never. We gotta
and that's another big pet peeve of mine is exactly what you're talking about. And I just want to emphasize this because I totally agree. For a while, there was a seminary that we were closely associated with in the last churches I was at that totally just disregarded and got rid of their counseling program.
Wow.
Because they took the approach of like, oh, this is just a spiritual matter, and like a healthy mind was the mind of Christ, and you just need to pray or have faith. And I think I'm so glad you said that, because there is definitely a physical side of things that need to be healthy.
Yes.
And you should see a health professional. You should see a counselor. You can make sure everything is good physically first.
Yeah.
And then we'll address the other side, or vice versa. We'll address both together. Let's like you're saying, shoot both directions. Because I think the church has been guilty of that too, where where Christian counseling isn't important anymore, because you just need to have the mind of Christ. Just
exactly.
Yeah. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like what if there's actual stuff going on in my head that I can't, so.
Yeah. You can have Jesus and a doctor.
That's right.
And a therapist.
That's right. That's right.
They can coexist.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I couldn't agree more. It's that balance of like both and there's demons and angels. There's also physical and
I think even physical and mental, we recognize there's a difference between those two. Sometimes I have a physiological ailment, sometimes there's a mental ailment, and I would just want to add to that sometimes there's a spiritual ailment, and and sometimes it's not neatly separated. These things all affect each other. If we have mental issues, it can affect our physical health, vice versa, and spiritual too. And so we want to do whole treatment. We want to address all those areas. And so we as pastors can help out and say, okay, let's do some spiritual calibration. Let's see what's going on here, while also saying, go find someone that's better equipped to make sure physically things are working well too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's an easy excuse. The name of the podcast is to say the devil made me do it, but sometimes there's other stuff going on.
Sometimes you're just a jerk. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Well, I guess some final thoughts, maybe where to land. I guess for me, I do want to just strike again that chord of balance. Like, we should be aware. I think the demonic, the spiritual is something that matters, affects how we live and what our life is like. But at the same time, not having some respect for it, realizing, we can want to be having some distance, and then also saying, it's not always demonic. It's not always the devil making me do it. So the Christian life is one of trying to strike a balance and say, we want to affirm these things, but we don't need to go overboard. We don't need to go crazy.
That's right. Yeah. And I would just emphasize too, like boundaries, setting some, a lot of times we have physical boundaries, mental boundaries, but like, what are your spiritual boundaries? Like, what are some boundaries in which you shouldn't maybe step beyond in case you want to, really deal with some crazy stuff. So I really encourage that too. But I would also say, I would love to hear maybe your stories about maybe some stuff you've experienced, or I'm always fascinated by this kind of thing because, again, I haven't had much experience with, some of these things. Definitely real and it's definitely out there. But I'd love to hear if any of you that are listening have had some really cool or maybe even some scary experiences with this realm of life. I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to just kind of hear your story. So feel free to comment in the comments below if that's you, or get in touch with us. You can go to rhythmchurch.org and shoot us an email. We'd love to hear your stories on that as well.
For sure. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for joining us for another episode here at The Current. It's been great. Time's already gone. We'll be back next week. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow us, and we'll be back next Friday.
All right. Sounds good.